Welcome to Kentucky.
The birthplace of Abraham Lincoln and built on the largest cave system in the known world. The home of Daniel Boone, Hunter S. Thompson, horse racing, and bourbon.
That when the hour grows late, the Bluegrass state becomes the breeding ground for realms beyond those familiar to the human race. In the east, ghosts, spirits, and ethereal entities roam the hills and hollers.
In the north, Mothman beats his wings along the banks of the Ohio River.
To the west, small green creatures stalk farmhouses and disappear without a trace when shot.
While in the south, the energy of the Veiled Witch is palpable just over the border. Joining with us as we investigate just what goes wrong in the Bluegrass night.
And ask the question, how many coincidences are too many? There's no need to check the clock.
There's no need to check the clock. Time is an illusion.
Time is an illusion.
And it's midnight.
It's midnight. In Kentucky.
In Kentucky. In Kentucky.
In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the midnight hour once again for Midnight in Kentucky. I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
We have a very, very special episode coming up this evening in which we speak to one of the original alien abductees, Mr. Calvin Parker from Pascagoula, Mississippi. Calvin's experience in 1973 is one of the defining abduction experiences of the phenomena. So we're looking forward to talking with him later this evening. But first, we had quite the blow up over on the Facebook page this week.
Yes, we did.
Before we get even into all of that, we definitely want to thank the new listeners that's brought in, all the new followers that's brought in. So let's just dive right into what happened.
Crack this egg.
Crack this egg right here on the air. So last Saturday, a very good friend of the show sent us a photo, or a couple photos, from a place called Livingston, Tennessee. Her best friend's mom was passing through the area and happened to notice this massive dish-shaped purple light. She said that she passed by it, she couldn't figure out what it was. And if you get on the Facebook page and look at these photos, there's some pretty creepy stuff. Some extremely creepy stuff. When I first saw it, I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what it was. As with so much in this, though, I had the feeling that we would probably reach an explanation for whatever this light was. It was creepy. It was weird. I couldn't explain it at the time, but it was just one of those intuitive feelings. I was like, we're going to find out what this is. And I honestly figured that somebody would mention what it was within the first 20 likes. We would say, mystery solved, end of case, done. That's not at all what happened. The post blew up. There were right now we're sitting at over, I think, 3,000 shares on the post. All kinds of comments. By Tuesday evening, the post had been shared by several of my friends on my personal page. And people were starting to come in that said that they saw these lights too, that they were creeped out by them. They didn't know what they were. So I went to bed Tuesday evening thinking that would probably be the end of it. We would do one more update. And, I was excited about these additional witnesses coming in. When I woke up Wednesday, like I said, it had been shared countless times. People were commenting. As far as we can tell at this point, and I don't want to rule anything out because with so much of this stuff, so much weird stuff happens. As far as we can tell at this point, the lights were made by a lettuce grow facility, lettuce greenhouse there in Livingston, and the excessive amount of fog on over that weekend produced these lights. It caught the lights in the fog and made this dish-shaped light in the sky. Several people have commented on the status saying that it's the greenhouse, by Wednesday at 12, people had gotten so in a frenzy about this that, and of course the internet being the internet, some people were being negative and hostile without reason. There was no reason to, but there are always going to be those people on the internet. So I felt like we need to make a statement. I had planned to make a statement later on that evening, but it had just reached a fever pitch, and I was like, we need to make a statement. So we updated, and I explained, we've come to the conclusion of what these lights were. We thank the witnesses, because despite what these lights were, we are extremely grateful to every witness we get that tells us anything.
Yes.
I mean, that's the point of all of this. That's what we're doing this for. I thank the witnesses. I explained, that these lights probably come from this lettuce greenhouse. And I went on to explain, because I don't feel like a lot of people understand what true investigators of this phenomenon do. We're not out there to make everything look like a UFO, to make everything look like it's an otherworldly craft. We're out there to find the truth. As I'm sure we will talk about with Calvin Parker tonight, a man who has said many times he doesn't want the fame. He doesn't want the media attention. He wants to know what happened to him. That's the point of this. We want to know what's going on. At no point would we embellish something or say that something is what it's not. That doesn't reach anywhere. That's not the point of this. So I released this statement and I explained, as investigators, our job is to crack these mysteries, is to find out what these things are. Would I love for it to have been a massive, otherworldly, extra-dimensional craft? Yeah, of course. But I'm not going to lie to myself and tell myself that it's something, or anybody else, tell myself that it's that when it's not. And, like I said, it's pretty conclusively decided now that that's what this was. It was these lettuce greenhouse lights caught in the atmosphere. That doesn't stop the tons of people that have commented on the page and said that they saw the same thing, that they saw, lights very much like this that have been moving, that have, different colors. But like I said, this is the point of these things. The point is to come to the conclusion of these mysteries. Hopefully it's something unexplained. I would love for it to be something unexplained. I mean, I would love to stumble on something of that caliber that we are like, we don't know what this is, and nobody else does either. This case didn't pan out that way. This case we've explained, as 95% of these cases will. We're here for the other 5%. Just like I said at the end of the post, we're here to dissect and talk about those other 5% that can't be explained.
Right. And that's the thing, is a lot of people, jumped on the page, and I read through a lot of the comments and was being very critical. But this is how you find answers in this field.
Right, exactly.
This is not all what you see on TV where everything is something or we leave you as a cliffhanger.
Sure.
This was explained. Ben did a very nice summary of that and explained it. And I feel like that was good enough. And, and that's the thing, is we all cannot be sensationalized by making something out to be what it's not. And
exactly.
And dragging it out for such a long time. And, and then people kind of being critical on stuff. We have to question things when things look odd or out of place.
Right. I mean, if we can't ask the questions, how will we ever get the answers?
Exactly. And if you don't ask questions and try to seek an answer for them, you're a sheep. You're just going to take whatever is fed to you.
Very much so.
And the thing is, there's a lot of people who were skeptical that jumped on and was like, in very many creative ways, or
not even skeptical, ways. Debunkers,
yeah. That was, this is the lettuce factory, But this was even after you posted
the breakdown.
Right. And I'm like, put your jump to conclusions, Matt, up.
Sure.
And read the whole article.
Right.
I know we're in a culture where people just read the headlines, and
sure.
everybody's used to clickbait or whatever,
right.
or reading the Fox News alert or MSNBC alert comes
right.
up. But, to get the information absorbed into your brain, you're going to have to read and do a little bit of critical thinking yourself.
Sure. You got to see the information.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I feel like what we have done here is, we took something that was unexplained.
Sure.
Listened to people, researched it, and come up with a conclusion of what it was.
We solved the mystery. Maybe not us, but we outsourced it to those people, right. To our followers. We said, hey, has anybody else seen this thing? Anybody else know what this is? And I feel like that's kind of our job at Midnight Kentucky.
Yes.
We find the weird stuff, and we're like, hey, anybody else seen this? Everybody else know what this is?
Yeah. And even with other things that we have talked about in previous episodes, we have looked at the evidence and picked those things apart.
Sure.
And anything we can't explain, we're kind of like, well, that's up for future review, or maybe if we get more information, we'll share it with you.
Right.
We're not trying to sensationalize every little thing that's going on.
Or anything. We're not trying to sensationalize anything.
Anything at all.
Right. I mentioned this in the breakdown. I'm like, this is a very rare case of paranormal investigation. Usually a paranormal investigation breaks down into speculation on both sides. People will say, take the spook lights, for instance. People will say, oh, those are car lights coming over the hill. And the believer's side will say, those aren't car lights, those are extraterrestrial craft. We don't know. Like, at the end of the day, we don't know if these are extraterrestrial craft or if they're, most paranormal investigations break down into that speculation. This is a very rare case that we have a conclusion. A probable conclusion. Because I don't want to cast out completely that what was saw was unexplained. That's just me. We have a very likely conclusion. Makes sense. A lot of people say that this is what this is. But I want to leave enough room, to cast some aspersions. But more than likely, we have this concluded. The mystery has been concluded. We know what this is. That's a very rare thing for either side, the skeptics or the believers in this community. And it happened very quickly. This case also happened extremely fast, simply because of, there were people that lived in the area that knew what it looked like. There were, the wonders of the social media age where it went up and got shared so much. Like I said, just a few minutes ago, this is what we do it for. We do it to find out what these mysteries are and to conclude these mysteries and say for the next person, we know what that is. That's not unexplained. We know what this is the next time this happens. So we won't spend so much energy and so much, investigation on the same thing that we've investigated before. We want to find out what can be misidentified as UFOs. So when we find a actual bona fide craft from somewhere else, we know that it's none of these things.
Right, exactly. And, once we start looking at, the facts of things when they come out, and looking at additional evidence, it's easy to say, hey, yes, this was a lattice factory, or,
sure.
Or if it wasn't a lattice factory there at all, it'd be unexplained.
Right, exactly.
In these cases, most things do have a logical explanation.
Sure. Also, and I almost quoted this in my breakdown, but I wanted to save this for the show because I knew that you would appreciate it. John Keel said, belief is the enemy.
Yes.
Any belief you have, whether that belief is ultradimensionals do not exist, ultradimensionals do exist. You're discrediting yourself as a researcher or as an investigator, because a true investigator should go in with no beliefs, no aspersions, no preconceived notions of what they're researching, and they should just do the groundwork and find out what it is. There are very few researchers that do that, very few investigators that can do that. That's almost transcending your humanity at a certain level, which I don't think many of us are capable of doing. To believe one way or the other is to cast yourself in a certain light. It's to, and you can't do that. That's not what investigations are about. Investigations are about reaching the conclusion of the mystery. Right.
And, you brought up John Keel. I'd like to throw in there, he has lots of good books.
Oh, yeah.
Eighth Tower is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
I'd recommend anybody reading that who's interested in this, realm of topic that we're talking about tonight.
Right. And Keel had plenty of events that he explained.
Yeah.
He it's much like Calvin Parker, who we'll be talking to here in a minute. He talks about Philip Mantle. In my mind, one of the greatest modern day UFO researchers living that we have. And I've heard Calvin talk a few times about how Philip Mantle, once he's on something, he don't let it go.
Right.
Like, he either wants to find out if it's legitimate or he wants to find out if it's a hoax. And there is no in between for Philip. He's going to find out. That's what researchers do. That's what good investigators do. Hynek, another one. Bud Hopkins, who I'm sure both of these guys will be talking about tonight with Calvin. those guys are researchers. Those guys are investigators. They don't let up until they don't have an explanation or they have a solid explanation.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
So tonight, like I mentioned at the top of the show, we are going to be speaking with legendary alien abductee Calvin Parker. On October 11th, 1973, Calvin and his friend Charles Hickson had an encounter that not only would forever change Calvin and Charles, but would change the face of ufology from that point on. Many people consider Calvin's abduction, of the top tier of UFO abductions and UFO incidences. You've got the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, you've got Travis Walton, you've got Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson. So we're extremely excited to have Calvin here for our very first interview on the show. This is the first interview we've done on the show. So we're going to take a very short break, and we'll be right back with our interview with Calvin. Thanks for tuning in to Midnight Kentucky.
So, Calvin, thank you so much for being here with us. We've researched and studied your case, and it's just like sitting here with somebody straight out of a book for us. And I guess it is, where you just released your latest book.
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, that's two of them. I never was planning on a second book, but it happened to come about. And the reason why, it was just so much after the first book, it just got it kicked off, and it was so many things coming forward. There wasn't no way to do an addendum on the book. The first book put it in, and it ended up being as big as the second.
Sure, and it seems like that's the way that these things works. It seems like you start digging into any case like this, it seems like more and more starts pouring out to the point where you almost got to keep continuing with it.
It was surprising, the new evidence and the new witnesses that came forward. This was 45 years ago. I figured everything would be forgotten, done, and over with. And I actually like the second book better than the first book, because the second book's not all about me, not all about what happened. It's the new witnesses, the new evidence, just a lot of good information in there, where I didn't enjoy writing the first book because I didn't want to write it. But the second book was there.
Sure, exactly. The second book had kind of taken on a life of its own after that first book.
Yes, sir. So it was no way not to do the second one.
Exactly. And, the second book, it not that your story needed anything adding to, but it definitely adds a whole nother layer onto that original experience.
Yes, sir, it does. It puts it in a different perspective, and it adds a lot of credibility to the story, which the first story, didn't have a whole lot of credibility added just through my side. But this second book, it puts a lot of credibility to it.
Very much so. I was actually listening to your interview this morning with Jimmy Church, and you were talking about all those new witnesses and all these new people that come forward that actually saw this thing. And it's quite amazing how many people actually witnessed this happen.
It is, and it surprised me. since then, I've become friends with a lot of the law enforcement that was back then and all. And they told me that the phones blew up even before we come forward and come in. The dispatcher with the police department down here took over 50 calls before we even called in ourselves that they had seen something around and all and different things.
Right. But so people were seeing this thing before your encounter ever even happened.
Yes, sir. And I mean, it's credible people like the Coast Guard. They even have a Coast Guard report that came out where they called these fishermen called the Coast Guard, and it was 6 members on the Coast Guard vessel, and they went out and they took a mooring hook, and there was something underwater, and they bumped it under the water, and it scared them boys so bad. I talked to some of them not too long ago, and they actually seen it, bumped it, put a lot of credibility into the story, being it was Coast Guard, because they had the right reports.
Right, and this was under the water where you all were located that evening.
Yes, sir. We're just up above where we was a little while. This had actually already happened to us. We was in interrogation at the sheriff department, and the Coast Guard got a call. Now, keep in mind, there wasn't no media yet. I mean, it was just people calling in. And the Coast Guard got a call that something was going on. Well, they went out and investigated it. And then when this came out, the guy over the Coast Guard wanted to interview with me and Charlie. Of course, I never gave it, but I read his narrative that he'd written on it. And it was kind of scary. It scared them too.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, there's something under the water. You don't know what it is, and then you're getting all these reports of these strange aircraft in the air, and then of course your all's encounter. It would definitely be a terrifying thing.
Oh yeah, and
go ahead. I'm sorry.
And that night there were several people driving over the bridge and actually seen the craft, and then we also have the eyewitnesses that seen it land over there and everything. Right.
If you don't mind, Calvin, I know you've told this story a few times, and I know that a lot of our listeners are familiar with this, but would you just give us a brief breakdown of what happened to you in October of '73?
Yes, sir. I'd be glad to. Of course, like I say, this was October 11th of 1973. Well, I actually wasn't even supposed to be down here on the coast, but I had got a new job. I was engaged to get married in November, and I was working in the oil field before I took his job. So I took a job with a friend of my father's, and he was a friend of mine.
Sure.
And it was at a shipyard, and we had got off work, and he asked me if I wanted to go fishing. And that sounded a pretty good deal to me, so I said, yeah, let's go for a little while. Because October was cooling down a little bit. Of course, it was a full moon outside. I said, I got one problem. I don't have any fishing equipment with me. He said, that's all right. I've got some, and you can use mine. Well, that's a big gesture for somebody in the South. If they loan you the fishing equipment, they give you the firstborn or something, so.
Oh, yeah. Loaning fishing equipment ain't a normal thing up here in the South. You'd rather trade, your car, your boat, or something else for your fishing equipment.
Your wife, yeah, anything but your fishing equipment.
Amen to that.
So we went by his house, picked up the fishing equipment. He said, now, I never had fished that much down here. But he said, I got a place that I go. It's the old grain elevator. Let's go try it. Well, they got these little bugs that's so bad down here, you can't see them. They call no-see-ums, but they got a mouth like a hippopotamus when they bite. And they sting. So we just couldn't stay there. So we left and went to an old abandoned shipyard that he knew. And he said the bugs wouldn't be as bad there. So when we pulled up, I noticed it was a no trespassing sign, a lot of trash, a lot of debris. And I said, Charlie, there's a no trespassing sign here. We can't fish here. He said, oh, I fish here all the time. And I thought, yeah, we fixing to go to jail for fishing over here. And I said, how did I said, they don't do much keep up around here. And like I say, it was an abandoned shipyard, no Shaw Peter shipyard. He said, well, when the water comes in, it brings in all this debris, and when it goes out, it leaves it. So we parked probably 100 yards from where we was going to fish, and we struggled through this debris, pushed the old no trespassing sign out of the way, and we got to the pier. Well, we had just got there, and I had pulled up a log, and we was sitting on this log, and I remember looking down across the water, all the way across the river, and I was thinking to myself, how does an old steel hull ship, because it was an old Coast Guard cutter or either a Noah ship there, how does something made out of steel float? And that's what was on my mind. I wasn't thinking about anything else. Sure. And then that's when I noticed coming from behind me some hazy blue lights. And they was reflecting out across the water there. And as they reflected out, you know, it looked just like the lights on a patrol car that the police use down here.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So I was thinking we fixing to get run off or go to jail for trespassing.
Right.
So we stood up and turned around, and that's when a big bright light just hit us. I mean, it was blinding. So when this bright light hit us, it kind of blinded us for just a minute in our vision, but we was both turning around then. And I noticed three bulky creatures coming toward us. And I still couldn't make out what it was. You know, I still thought it could be the law, and that was their spotlight that was shining on us.
Sure.
And as they got closer, then I was thinking, you know, boy, we've done messed up now because they didn't look like nothing I had ever seen before. Right. Two of them had got a hold of Charlie, and one of them got a hold of myself. Well, I still couldn't make out the facial features or anything on this thing, but I knew they was probably a little over 5 foot, and their heads set square down on their shoulders. They looked like big Green Bay Packer football players or something.
Right.
One of them got a hold of myself by the left arm, and that's when I heard a little whoosh of air. So when I heard this, you know, it kind of took all the fear out instantly. And what we later found out in the emergency room and all, that was an injection that they had gave us. You know, this came back through the blood work, the emergency room. And I still don't know what it was, but it relaxed us. So this thing picked me up and carried me toward the craft. Now, I lost sight of Charlie at this time, so, you know, I don't know where he was or what he was doing.
Right.
But when we got
solo.
Right. When we got to the door, I remember I couldn't move my body, but I could roll my head and roll my eyes and look. And I remember looking inside this craft that we was at, into the door, trying to see where the lights was coming from. Well, it wasn't no light fixtures or anything. It was just coming out of the wall. And that was kind of surprising. But, you know, by this time I had other things to worry about than where these lights came from.
Right,
so this deal made a left turn, went down a hall, then made a right turn, and went into what I call an examination room. And in this room there was a glass-looking table. It was made out of glass or something, but it was a nice-looking table. And this big, bulky creature carried me over and laid me down at an angle on this table. And then I still couldn't move, and he backed up out of the way and just shut down. So that's kind of made me think he was a robot of some kind. Well, as I was laying on this table, I was looking straight up, and out of the ceiling came something about the size of a deck of cards. and it stopped about a foot and a half from my head, and it started revolving around my head. And as it would revolve around, it would click, go click, 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 click. Then it just shot back up into the ceiling. So now whatever that was, I don't know. I've always figured and wondered, but it was probably like an MRI or something.
Sure, that's exactly what I was going to say. I've had a few MRIs in my life, and there's always that click when it's taking those photos of you.
Yeah, and this thing clicked.
Right.
And then
right.
I just got a sense that I wasn't in there long, and I rolled my head and I looked, and that's all I could do at this moment was roll my head. And
sure.
Coming toward me was this female-looking creature. Now, I don't know if she was female or not. I just had the sense that, yeah, she was a female. And
right.
she looked normal. She had a nose, lips, face, eyes, ears, hair. She looked...
For all intents and purposes, this was a normal human being.
Yeah, as far as I was concerned. And I said it one time, and I said again, if I was at a bar drinking and seen her, I would have probably asked her out on a date.
Well, sure, yeah, of course.
That's how normal she looked.
Right, just like a good-looking human woman.
Right. Now, I don't know if she was dressed in a disguise, and later on I kind of feel like they can change their looks and their personalities to suit you so you're not so afraid. But, me being a man, I felt a little better that a woman was coming because I kept thinking if I could get up and move, I could take her and leave.
Right, exactly.
But she was coming toward me, but when she reached up with her right hand and kind of pinched me on the cheek, and I had no feelings, no sensations, but I did notice on her hands, her two middle fingers was a little longer than what human hands were. Right. And she pinched me on the cheek and rubbed it. Then she took her other hand and she pushed my chin down where it opened my mouth. Then she got them two middle fingers off that other hand and she ran them down my throat. And she came up behind that little thing that hangs down in the back. Now, what that deal is, I don't know. But she started trying to come up behind that, and I started choking. My nose started bleeding. And I just, just about to lose it then. Well, she stopped, and she pulled her finger out. And telepathically, she said, and this was what got me, it was in a redneck female voice. Just like you was sitting in somewhere and talking to one. She says, we're not going to harm you. And I thought, well, it's a little late for all that.
Right.
So, but anyhow, she pulled her hands out and she telepathically said that. And it was in a voice that I could understand, in a language I could understand. Right. And then she made a little grumbling noise. And everybody asked me what the noise sounded like. Well, down in the swamp down here where we live, they have alligators. During the spring, they have a mating call, and it carries out for miles across this water. And that's kind of what it reminds me of. And then this big thing in the corner, the big ugly one, as I call him, popped up like a jack-in-the-box. Right. And he come over and grabbed me by the arm again. And that's when Sir?
I'm sorry, do you think that low grumbling noise that this female entity made, do you think that was a signal to that other creature to activate, possibly?
There's no doubt in my mind that it was. And I think it was in, actually, I think the other three robotic-looking beings kind of worked for her, and she was the brains. Sure. And they might have accompanied her to keep from sending so many of their beings in case something happened.
Right.
But I do think that was a signal to activate him. Because like I say, he jumped up like a jack-in-the-box. And you could tell by his movement that he was mechanical. he wasn't thinking on his own, that somebody else was probably thinking for him. And he come over and he grabbed me by the arm again. And when he grabbed me by the arm, I felt a little push of air. And I found out later that was another injection, and I did have 2 injection marks on my arm. So then she kind of backed up out of the way. He picked me up, carried me back out to the river, put me down in almost the same spot that I was in, facing the river. Then my arms was outstretched on the water there. And that's when I heard Charlie's voice for the first time. He said, Calvin, you okay, son? Well, we both stood up. I was standing up. He was on the ground. He was up by then, and we turned around and looked at the craft. The bright light went out, and the little blue hazy lights were still there. And it just kind of picked up off the ground a little bit and more or less disappeared. That's how fast that happened.
Right.
Well, it was over then, so we was going to sit around and talk for a minute because the danger was already gone.
Sure.
And I told Charlie says, well, we need to tell somebody. I said, no, we don't need to tell nobody nothing. What we need to do, go home, get a good night's rest, and get up and go to work the next morning and not tell nobody nothing about this, because we don't know what it was, and we don't want nobody to know it, because I just went to work down here. They're going to think I'm an idiot if I come tell them. I'm engaged to get married, and her daddy is a real something else. And when he hears this, the engagement will be off.
Right. And at the time, it was a much different time for this type of thing as well.
Yeah, it was. And people don't realize, they said, well, why didn't you call somebody from there? Nobody could afford a cell phone back then.
Sure,
I remember my first cell phone bill that I got. When I got a cell phone, this was much later after this, was $600. They had to turn it off.
I can imagine. That's quite a cell phone bill right there.
Yes, sir, and I hadn't used it for just a few minutes.
Right.
So, they didn't have the social media or the cell phones or anything like that.
Sure.
So we made our way back to the car, put our fishing equipment in the trunk, and I went to get into the car, and I noticed the windows on his side was just shattered in place, both passenger side windows. And the keys, when I went to unlock the car, was sticking to the car. The car was kind of magnetic.
Right.
So we did get in, and I tried to crank it, and the little thing wouldn't crank. That was back then a brand new 73 Rambler Hornet.
And those are nice cars.
Oh, yeah, that was a nice little cheap ride.
Oh, yeah,
and
for sure.
It had less than 10,000 miles on it, and I never had no trouble with it. So eventually I got it to crank, but it wasn't running right. And we left, and we was going toward Charlie's house, and he said, pull over here, son. Well, back then they had blue laws, so nothing was open. And I was curious to see what time it was. Nothing open, and the only thing they had was a pay phone hanging on the wall. So we dug up under the car seats where change usually fell out of your pocket, got enough money, and I'm thinking he's going to call his wife.
Sure.
And he was out there, and I heard him mumbling for a few minutes, and he come back, and he said, well, they said call the local law enforcement. I said, who said that? Keesler face. I said, Charlie, we agreed not to tell nobody. He said, well, I got to call the local law enforcement, which that would have been the Jackson County Sheriff Department.
Sure.
Well, he scratched around and found another dime, got in there and called, and they said, fellas, y'all wait right there where you are. I know what they was thinking. We was drinking or on drugs or just pure out lying to them. So
especially at that time, yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And they drove up. Of course, I was the one driving, so they didn't terrorize Charlie. They come to my side of the car, wanted to see my driver's license, asked me to step out of the car. Now, they never searched the car. And they did what I call a field sobriety test right there on the spot. You know, where you follow their little lights with your eyeballs and stand on one leg, bend your head back, jump up and down, touch your nose, count from 100 back. I said, man,
everything they can throw at you.
Everything they could do. So if we'd been drinking, you know, we'd be in jail right then.
Sure.
Then he said, son, you look okay to drive. He said, follow us to the sheriff's department, which that would be the Jackson County Sheriff's Department. Well, I followed them over there, and we got there. They took us out of the car. They took Charlie into one room and me into another. And they did an interrogation on both of us. And they said, well, what did you see? I said, I didn't see nothing. I guess that other guy's crazy or something.
Right.
But where I messed up, because I was going to hang in there with my story. I didn't want my life ruined by this bull. Sure. So I was going to hang in there with my story where nothing happened and all. But where we made a mistake, they threw us in the room together. And we didn't realize there was a tape recorder hid in the room.
Right.
And they taped our conversation between ourselves. And then they come in there, the sheriff by then, Fred Diamond, which had a tough sheriff with a tough nature. They had called him. And one of the reasons that they called him, they was getting so many calls. Besides us being there, they was getting so many calls on something like this that he had to come in and check us out.
Right.
So he came in, and I noticed he'd come into that room and got something. I didn't know what it was at the time. You know, I was 18 years old, didn't really care what it was. I was just wanting to go home. Well, he listened
to get out of there.
Yes, sir. And this is what they call the secret tape. Well, he must have went out and listened to the tape. And he come back, he said, I know y'all boys went through something terrifying, and I want to get to the bottom of all this. Why don't y'all go home, get you a good night's rest, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.
Right.
So we left, gonna go home, and when we got to, I was renting a room from Charlie for $50 a week. So when we got to his house, there was a bathroom in my bedroom. So I went back to the bathroom. Now, keep in mind, I looked like I'd been in a bar fight. I was so beat up in the room.
Sure, right.
Yes, sir. So I went into this bathroom. I pulled all my clothes off. I threw them in a paper bag, shoes and everything. And I got in the shower, and there was a gallon of bleach on this shower. And I poured that bleach all over me.
Oh, yeah.
And just trying to get any germs or bacteria that was off. And the reason I did that, because back in the 60s, when they was having these Apollo missions, when these astronauts would come back, they would quarantine them for 7 days because they were scared they would having some kind of bacteria and all.
Right, some type of infection from out there.
Right. So I poured this bleach all over me and got in the shower and washed it off, and I changed clothes. And all they didn't have all these plastic bags, but they had paper bags. And I carried this bag out and threw it in a dumpster.
Right.
Well, the very next morning, of course, needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night. And I don't know what Charlie did. I got up, and it was early, and he was sitting in there with his wife drinking coffee, I guess. And I said, you ready to go to work? Or you want Blanche to fix you something to eat? She said, no, let's stop somewhere and get something. I wasn't hungry, didn't want to eat. And so we got in a car and we rode into work. Well, when we got to the shipyard that we worked at, the F.B. Walker and Son shipyard, this was only my second day there. So I didn't realize how many cars were supposed to be in the parking lot or nothing. But it was full. And there was trucks, these big TV camera trucks with these big uplinks on them that shot satellite signals up. There was a lot of them parked in there.
Right, and this was the media.
Right, and that was all the media. And I was wondering to myself, now what's going on here? And I still hadn't put two and two together if they was there for us.
Sure.
So we brassed in. Instead of having a time clock, they give you a piece of brass with a number on it. And that's what you do. You turn it in when you go and you pick it up when you leave.
Yeah.
Then they write your time down. So we brassed in, went to 4 workstations. And while we was at the workstations, we wasn't there 5 minutes. We got a call over the intercom and somebody was coming out of the office to get us, wanting us to come to the office. And I thought right then, oh, this is about us. And I knew we had agreed not to tell nobody. So I was thinking maybe Charlie might have told somebody then.
Right.
We got into the shipyard. The owner of the shipyard said, son, we cannot conduct business with all this going on here. We got the media. Y'all going to have to talk to them. We can't get on the phones. We can't make a phone call. Y'all can't go in the yard because people's going to wear the devil out of y'all wanting to know what went on.
Right.
And I
it
thought,
had pretty much shut down the shipyard.
The shipyard was shut down till the media left.
Right.
He said, look, I have an attorney that works for the shipyard. His name's Joe Camingo. And what I want, y'all to give a press release to him. So they ain't nothing for me to give, nothing happened. But Charlie went in there and he gave a press release to Joe, and Joe turned it over to the media. Well, that seemed to satisfy him for a few minutes. So by then, the sheriff from the previous day had showed up, Fred Diamond, and said, you know, I got to thinking about what you said in that room, that y'all might have some kind of disease, a bacteria, be exposed to radiation. And we should have done this last night. And this come over on the secret tape, and I had mentioned, you know, when he said he knew something happened.
Right. This was from the recording that they took of you and Charlie in the interrogation.
Right. And then after that, you know, I had talked to the sheriff a little bit because I didn't want to lie to law enforcement because, be honest, I was kind of scared of the law back in.
Sure, sure. I mean, it's a scary process to be in that interrogation room and, you know, be asked those questions, whatever the situation.
Exactly right. And if it was something simple, you know, they would get you back there and interrogate you. And back then, they didn't mind knocking a few teeth out. Now, they treated us with the most respect here.
Sure.
And I talked to one of the deputies that brought us in, or detectives that brought us in, still alive. And the son, Harold, interviewed him not too long ago, Karen Nelson. And he said, you know, I knew those boys were scared to death.
Right.
But anyhow, the sheriff was there, and he said, I need to take y'all to the emergency room, get you examined. And so he did that, and Dr. Bosco examined us. And back then, they didn't have computers to store records on, so it was all hard copies. And all that got stored in Hurricane Katrina. So when he got through with us, the sheriff told that deputy, he said, let's take them to Keesler Air Force Base. I've already called, get them checked for radiation. So we made a beeline to Keesler Air Force Base, which was 30 miles, a 30-minute ride, rather, from the hospital to there.
Right.
And when we got to the gate, they were already expecting us, so that we didn't just slow down at the gate. They flagged us all the way to the back, had an escort going back there. When we got to dock, there was 6 guys, and they had on hazmat suits. And they asked us to step out of the car and told everybody else to step back. And they examined us for radiation, which they didn't find nothing above normal, I don't guess. One of them said all clear. And when they did that, they started pulling their hazmat suits off. And they said they want to meet with y'all in the conference room down this hall all the way to the end. And I was wondering who they were.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
Exactly.
You know, I never heard about UFOs or aliens up until this minute. I had on my mind that right at this time, that this wasn't from this world.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, Calvin. What were you thinking about all of this at this moment when you're walking back to meet this group of people? As an 18-year-old kid, pretty much, who, you know, just started this new job, what was going through your mind as you're on this military base and these people are wanting to meet with you about your experience? What were you thinking at that moment?
Well, you know, I was wondering, what are they going to ask? What kind of trouble are we in? So I figured we was in a lot of trouble because the sheriff had told us if we lied to him, we fix and take our butts to jail and stay in there for a while. So they had already put the scare tactics out there. And in my mind, I was thinking, why did Charlie tell anybody? If we'd kept it a secret, we wouldn't be going through all this right now.
Right.
And there is when I quit talking to Charlie for a while. You know, I would touch base with him sometime, but we never really talked about what happened.
That was pretty much the end of your all's friendship right there. Not friendship, but your all's closeness, I guess.
Yeah. Kind of like I told somebody, my first day at work, I got a job, I got a physical, and I got fired all in the same day.
All right, that's another thing I was going to ask you about. I know that you had mentioned that in a couple interviews, but so did this shipyard actually fire you from the shipyard for this incident?
Actually, they didn't fire me. What they done is said, y'all need to take some time off.
Sure.
Well, to me, you know, when you take time off and you don't get paid, that's being fired. With no date to come back.
Oh, yeah, you got a living to make. That's not taking time off. You ain't getting no money then.
I do have to say, though, they paid us a couple of days there that I didn't work.
Sure.
And they were good people. And, you know.
Sure. It sounds like the situation was just something so big that they didn't know exactly what to do with it.
That's right. That's what I found out later. The sheriff department didn't know what to do. Nobody really knew. Kiesler didn't know what to do. When we got to this meeting.
Go ahead with the meeting. I'm sorry.
When we got in this meeting room, it was a lot of uniform officers in there from the Air Force. Then we had uniform officers from the police departments and sheriff departments and all that. And they was sitting around, and they couldn't be any more nicer than you could ask for. They asked us a few questions. Then they said meeting over with Charlie was talking to them. I said a few words to them. I told them I didn't remember anything happening. And that seemed to work for the moment. So we went back out, got in a patrol car, and as we was on our way back to the shipyard, and this is getting on up during the night, he told me, he said, there's somebody there to see you and see y'all and wants to talk to y'all. Y'all need to see him. And I was thinking, what now? But who this person was John Allen Hynek over Project Bluegrass.
Now, a huge name in ufology. One of the biggest, probably.
I think it probably is. I've just recently met his son, and me and him had long conversations. I asked him, how in the world did this man get from California to where I was that fast? I said, you know, regular airplanes don't travel in just a few hours. Of course, back then you didn't have all this details to go through. But anyhow, we got back, and John Allen Hynek took me in, and Dr. Harder that was with Hynek, which was over Kufco, took Charlie in. He gave him an examination. Hynek gave me his little speech and spiel. Then we swapped up, then Heineck said, could I meet with y'all the next day? Next morning, I'm going out to where this happened and look for evidence. I said, well, sure, I done been down here anyway. I'm gonna come in and see if they give me my last check so I can go home. So we went home and offered to get a little sleep. Now, keep in mind, I hadn't talked to my family or my friends or nobody about this yet. Well, I didn't for 45 years. So when we got back, I remember Heineck being upset with the sheriff's department because they didn't ribbon off the site where this happened.
So anybody could have just got down there pretty much.
And by this time, there was people down there. Of course, it was reporters down there. And I talked to the guy at the last book signing I had here in Pascagoula that owned the shipyard at that time. Now, buddy, he's a believer. I don't know if he might have found something or something else. He's 96 years old, and he said he just had to come and see me at this book signing. Sure. It could be that it made the shipyard so popular that Hawker Marine had bought it out. I don't know.
But it's also very possible he could have saw something at that shipyard, and he just remains quiet about it.
Exactly right. Because he was like I was. He was pretty old by then.
Sure.
And he was a businessman, and he didn't need for all this to get out. Now, he's still alive, and I've been really trying to find him. I even have him at this book signing coming by and pat me on the back and talking to me a few minutes. He said, I actually own the old Shaw Peter shipyard. So I would love to look him up. And I hadn't thought about this till tonight. But I think tomorrow I'll get on a quest to find him. And another thing I'm going to get on a quest to do, Dr. Bosco, the doctor that did the original examination that night, he's still alive. He's 90-something years old.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
He told his grandson when he seen me, and this was at the last book signing, that he wanted to talk to me. So something could come out of that.
For sure. And I was going to ask you, I know you said the records from the hospital got destroyed when there was some flooding in Katrina. What exactly did those records find?
I don't know. I really don't. But I know there was something in them.
Sure.
They proved one thing: we wasn't on drugs, we wasn't drinking, we didn't have no bacteria. But they had the blood work, and I was anxious to see what did show up in our blood work.
Sure.
And I would love to go see that doctor and ask him, because I know after all this time he wouldn't forget something like that. Because this was major.
Right. Yeah, that'd be a hard thing to forget. Be a very hard thing, as I'm sure you know, dealing with it for the past 46 years.
See, that's like, I would have went to my grave about this, and we had a neighbor die. Not even my neighbors knew who I was, my real name.
Right.
So when he passed away, we went to the wake, and I signed the register. I wasn't thinking. Normally, I don't sign nothing. And do you know how hard it is to run a business and not sign your name on anything?
Chief, I hadn't thought about that, but you got a very good point there. That would that'd be a hard way to go.
And I had a pipeline company, and there's times my payroll would be $40,000 a week, and if I didn't have money coming in, I'd have to go to the bank and borrow it. But I was set up at the bank where I just call them and tell them, look, can you put $30,000 in my account, and then I'll make a deposit, and y'all get it back, and all this. And they would do that. That would work good with you. Well, but anyhow, while we was at the wake, I had all these people coming up wanting to talk to me. They recognized my name. And this was after 45 years. This was July last year. So
did you ever think when this initial encounter happened that 46 years later people would still, remember who Calvin Parker is and remember what happened to him back in 73?
No, I thought it would just be like anything else. You get your 1 week of fame and then that's it.
And then even more than that, you had the owner of the shipyard that you were trespassing on way back then come up and pat you on the back. I imagine the 18-year-old Calvin Parker wouldn't have ever thought that when he was seeing that no trespassing sign down there.
Absolutely not. I figured I was fixing to go to jail.
Exactly, yeah.
I've recently seen in the Washington Post where they put a historical marker there in Pascagoula.
They did. They did that this year. Or actually, during October, I think, just here recently, they put that marker in, and they had the mayor came out and dedicated it, and the city staff was out there, and it was just a big deal. I mean, there was a lot of people showed up to that. My first book signing in Pascagoula, on the first book that I did, it went over so well, they had to shut the streets down for people to circle around the block and get in line. Nobody would get over. And that was shocking because when I did this book, I figured, I sell 10 copies and I have to buy them. And I'm going to give one of them to a family member. And I won't have to tell them about this book.
Sure.
But it exploded. Went number one bestseller in 4 to 7 days. And it's been up there. And now we got it all over.
Go ahead. Right. That's what I was going to say. It's been published in several countries now, if I've read correctly.
Several different countries, several different languages. I mean, it's in Spanish, German, French, Portugal, wherever that is. My Facebook account exploded. I'm not a social media guy,
I understand.
But I did this kind of for advertisement, just to get on and see what was going on.
Sure.
Well, I reached a friends limit, and I had to go through and either pay for new friends or go through and delete so many that don't keep up, that's not active, and to get new friends. But when this second book come out, it exploded. I'm getting fan mail every day when I go to the mailbox. Somebody want me to autograph pictures and send them back to them and things like that. The post office loves it down here.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
It's it's a lot like Whitley Strieber. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or researched any of his abductions, but he talks about these people that have experienced the same thing. It seems like they just need somebody to tell about this, or they need somebody to talk to about it. And it seems like you might be kind of experiencing the same thing, maybe.
Yeah, and it hadn't slowed down. Then about the time it started slowing down, Philip said, we got so much. Philip Mantle, which is a publisher in the UK, let's do a second book.
Right.
And I said, hell, I didn't want to do the first book, Philip. So why would I want to do the second book? But when I got to putting the research together, and Philip got to putting the research together, it was amazing. Me reading through this and finding all these eyewitnesses, and some that I knew about, and some I didn't know about, that Philip had known about, and he put them in the book. But it's been amazing to me.
Oh, I'm sure. And, I know on your interview with Jimmy Church, he kind of asked you about this, but I'm sure that, experiencing something this strange and out of the ordinary, there has to be that question of, am I losing my mind? Am I going crazy? I'm sure when all of these other eyewitnesses came out, that really changed your perspective of this event as well.
It did, because the only thing I knew every now and then, I'd see Charlie on the on a TV talk show or something like that. where I decided to stay quiet about it, and did stay quiet about it up until the book. Charlie took the other road. He made all these conferences. He made all the TV talk shows. And he actually kept this thing alive all these years. And, you know, I decided not to do this. It was still bothering me to the extent that I was still not, before Betty Hill died, I went up and spent 3 or 4 days at her house with her.
Oh, wow.
Because I wanted some answers, and I figured, you know, she went through this. And at the time, you know, that this happened, this is way before Travis Walton, but it was Betty and Barney Hill, then me and Charlie.
Right. You were one of the original major breaking cases, other than Betty and Barney Hill. Betty and Barney Hill being probably, you know, the most well-known abduction case in history.
Right. And somebody said, well, why do you believe them? I said, well, let me tell you a little something. Back in the 60s, when this happened to them, a white woman didn't marry a black man. That just didn't happen. Yeah. You didn't put the publicity on yourself. Because, you know, you didn't want everybody to know about it, because that was just a no-no.
Right, especially in the South.
Right. And I said, if they put themselves on the line that far.
Right. Very much so. So, Calvin, what did you and Betty discuss while you were up there? I know it was a private conversation, but if there's anything, you know, what did you guys talk about while you went up there and spoke with her?
Well, we actually went out to where this happened to them, and I got to see where all this happened. And she's a firm believer. She showed me a drawing of a star map they gave her. And I believe her. You know, she's a real credible, believable person. And I believe Betty 100%. Now, I didn't get to meet Barney. He was dead by then.
Right. He passed away just about a decade after the experience, if I'm thinking correctly.
Yeah, it wasn't that long. Now, I did get to meet her niece. She did a hypnosis session on me, Kathleen Martin.
Okay, yeah.
And I got to visit with her and talk to her, and she's actually has a degree in forensic science. And I got to meet her at UFO Congress in Arizona, and we got to know each other. So I agreed to let her hypnotize me. She flew from Florida down here to Pascagoula just to do that. And we had a 3-hour session, and all that's in this second book.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I knew that you had been hypnotized since this event. Let me ask you, and this is just kind of a personal interest of mine. I know that when Charlie initially, you know, went to the media with this, and you know, you all had that discussion about not talking to anybody about it. I was just wondering now, looking back 46 years later, you know, after these 2 books, and after, you know, you've told your story kind of to the world, is there still that, and I don't want to say resentment, but I'm sure you know what I mean, is there still that part of you that wishes Charlie hadn't ever said anything?
Oh, yeah, because that changed my life. I mean,
sure.
I got married that following November. I still hadn't talked about this till 46 years later with my wife. Now, you try to keep a secret from your wife for 46 years, and there's tension there.
Sure. You try and keep a secret for an hour or two, there's tension there.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what it is, but they can tell when you're lying to them or not telling them nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And then my family, I never talked to them about this till the book came out. I had no intentions of ever talking about this. I had a son that died from a drug overdose, to be honest with you, in 2012. And I would have given anything if I had sat down and just talked to him, because he's asked me questions about it, and I never told him nothing about it.
So your family knew, you know, that this had all happened to you, yet you had never really sat down with them personally and told them about these things.
Exactly right. They all knew what was going on.
Right.
But, you know, I never would tell nobody. I didn't want no attention brought on it. And, you know, I didn't want no attention brought on to them. I guess in a way I kind of felt like I was protecting them from something.
Oh yeah, and you know, things have gotten a lot better about this type of thing, and a lot better about this type of phenomena. And people are definitely, you know, willing to listen much more these days. But back in those days, that was not it was not something you talked about very readily.
No, because, you know, people would laugh at you, think you crazy and all this.
Sure.
And I'm glad I waited this long to come out, you know, with the books. And I'm glad I did when I did, because like I say, you know, one thing it did was brought me closer to my family, to my wife especially. We got where she'd go to these conferences with me. You know, they pay my way and buy my tickets, put me in a motel room. Well, I pay her way, and she'd go with me, and it's like taking a little mini vacation. And
sure, yeah.
we've got to meet a lot of decent people at these conferences. Very few oddballs,
right?
You know, that we met.
Sure. Me and Stephen do the same thing. We get to go to these conventions, and it's kind of like our, you know, weekend to kind of chill out and meet people. And you're exactly right. You know, from the stereotypical perspective of people that are into, you know, the ufology community or the unknown or whatever, everybody thinks they're these, you know, weird people but really a lot of them are very down to earth that just want to know the answers to these questions.
Yeah. And I know one of the first that I went to was with Nick Torres, and that was at McAllen, Texas. And they had a festival outside where everybody in town, you know, would come to the festival. Right. And I got tickled because they all had aluminum foil wrapped around their head and all. And
right.
They would come up and talk to me with this aluminum foil. I said, what in the world is going on with aluminum foil?
Right, yeah.
But somebody explained that movie that Mel Gibson made, you know, where he put aluminum foil on his kid's head and all. And it was more of a costume deal for them instead of a...
Sure. But, you know, I've learned over the years that any way you can get anybody to start talking about this stuff, it seems like everybody's got a weird story somewhere along the line. So it may not be to the extent of yours, but, you know, somebody has had something strange happen to them. Everybody, it seems like.
Right. I mean, it's more of this that's been going on than what people realize. And until I got into this year or so ago, I didn't realize that because I was a recluse. I didn't get out. The only thing I wanted to do was work, take care of my family. And that's what I did. I didn't get out and talk about this. Most people didn't know what my name was. Right. And I actually moved back to the Mississippi Gulf Coast to bought a house and lived here. And the only people that I got mad one day, this was a pretty good while back, we had company, and a reporter come driving up, come to my back steps. And the school board and the tax people had told him where I lived. Wow. And all I got upset about that. I threatened to run for tax commissioner and everything else and fire everybody in there.
Well, yeah. Hey, if we was in Mississippi, we definitely vote for you.
There you go. So it's been a battle. The secret is what the biggest battle was. That and the not knowing. And actually, when this happened, you know, we have that big shipyard that builds these ships for the government. I figure a couple of rednecks got out and got to drinking, had an experimental craft, and come by there and got some laughs out of it. But it was far deeper than that because we checked into all that. Now, I got to say one thing for the publisher on this book. He's not just a publisher for a book. He is an investigator, and he leaves no stones unturned. And if he really don't feel in his heart that you're honest and truth, he'll expose you for that.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about Philip Mantle.
Philip Mantle. Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. Philip Mantle is, you know, I don't know him well, but I'm very familiar with his work, and I've gotten acquainted with him over these past few months. And he is one of the best investigators I've ever seen. I know he was one of the prominent people that worked on the alien autopsy video, and he's You know, he's drugged that
yeah.
out to the light of day and let people know about that. And I deeply respect that.
And what he don't do, he don't drop nothing once he gets on your case until you admit that he's right. So he's been one of my hardest opponents in this, because before he published the book, I mean, he did his homework and his research.
Right.
And matter of fact, he called me. He said, he called me on something besides the book. Charlie had written a book, and Philip called me up wanting to know about it. He got in touch with Martin Willis, which put him in touch with me. And I said, I don't know about Charlie's book. I've never read it. Don't want to read it. I have no idea. Well, why don't you get out and talk about your story? Well, Philip, every time I do, the press changes what I say. And I don't like that bull where they have to change something to make it bigger than what it is or something.
Right.
So I'm not messing. He said, well, have you ever thought about this is your legacy? If you put it in black and white, they can't change what you say because it's documented and well said. I said, well, I thought about that. I said, look, Philip, I don't have an education. I don't have enough education to write a book. Not going to. He said, well, I'll help you along. I'll keep you on the right tracks. So about a week later, he called back, but I had him on no answer on my caller ID. Well, I was loading my boat on the trailer, and it kept ringing. And I said, well, it could be something wrong at home. Without looking, I reached and grabbed, and it was Philip Mantle. He said, well, have you thought about it? And I didn't want to hang up on the man because I didn't want to be rude because I'm not really a person. And I said, no, I really hadn't thought about it. I don't think I want to do it. But we sat there and talked a little bit more, and he kind of talked me into all this. So I went and told my wife we're going to do a book. Philip said, well, it'll probably take you 3 years to do a book. I said, bull. That book's in my mind right now. I said,
yeah.
The only thing I don't want, you as a publisher, I know y'all go in, correct spelling, correct punctuations, correct the language. I don't want that. The only way I would do a book if you change nothing in this book. I mean, not the punctuation, not the spelling, not nothing. I said, I want this book to be me.
You wanted it in your own words, just as you witnessed it and saw it. Sure.
Well, we had some not really problems. The biggest problem is communication between us because he's from the UK and he speaks proper English.
Right.
And I'm Southern redneck, and, you know, sometimes he don't know. We have different words and terms that we use here in the South that they don't have. They have no idea.
Sure, exactly. Sure. Just like they have all those terms and stuff over there that us Southerners just, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's a complete different language.
Right.
So he said, well, it'll probably take you 3 to 4 years to do a book. I said, bull. It'll be done in a couple of weeks. So I told my wife, I come in and told my wife, I'm going to do the book you wanted me to do. I'm going to my office. I'm closing that door. I'm taking the phone off the receiver. I don't want a phone call. I don't want to see nobody. I don't want no company. I want you to come once a day and bring me something to eat and something to drink.
Right. Hey.
She said, you're kidding. I said, no, I'm not. In 2 weeks' time, the first book was ready for publishing.
Right. Right. Because you had it. You knew the story. You knew what you was going to tell. You just sat down and wrote it. Yeah.
And what was so funny, you know, I got it. He sent a copy of the manuscript when he got it all in a book. Well, I was reading it to be sure he hadn't changed nothing. And we got to the back of the book, and I was reading where I was talking about a bologna sandwich. He called it a blondie sandwich. I didn't have the heart to tell her to go in there and correct all that. I thought it was kind of funny because that was nothing major. It's just what I was eating.
Sure,
and,
yeah.
So You know, he stood by his word. That man has done everything he said he would do, and I appreciate him for it. He just really don't know how much.
Philip is one of the best investigators I've ever, I've talked to a lot of investigators and I've read a lot of research, and he's one of the most thorough and best investigators I've ever come in contact with. And we're hoping to get him on the show and talk to him because I know he has all kinds of stories from this field.
Oh, he has story after story.
Right.
Now, the thing about him, he don't just take somebody's word for something. He finds stuff out that you don't think can be found.
Right.
And,
he digs in.
He does his background work. He checks everything. And then he gets in there and he pushes a book. And part of mine and his deal was, Philip, I'll help you push this book, however it turns out, for a year. So the following October, which was October this year, I said, I got my houseboat about ready. I'm retiring, I'm going off grid, and I don't want to talk about the book no more.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you a bit, Calvin. Hey, we're happy we got you in November.
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing about it when that second one come out, it's kind of obligated me a little bit longer. Of course, my houseboat's not finished, or I'd let him wear it. But there's people wanting the movie rights on the deal. We have screenplays being written. If I go off grid, I cannot answer the questions that some of these people have. He can handle just so much. Sure, and then it's up to me to handle the rest of it. So we actually have a screenplay being written, and the guy selling the pitch, he has a lot of questions. We've actually turned down 4 to 5 screenplays because they wasn't as accurate as what we wanted them.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. So you're talking about like almost a movie like Fire in the Sky for Travis Walton, except maybe a more realistic, because I think Travis has some issues with the film, but something like that for the Pascagoula incident.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep it realistic, and I got some terms that I'm fighting for. Number one, these people down here has been so good to me on this coast. I want as much of it filmed down here as what we can.
Sure, yeah.
I want as many people involved in the movie, like for stand-ins and all that we can get. Now, that's like Philip told me, don't expect it to be exactly. He said, number one, when they do a movie, instead of having 2 or 3 policemen around you, they might not have that many. He said, little things is going to change and get out of hand. I said, well, I understand that. My deal is I don't want the story to really change.
Right. You want your words exactly how it happened to you.
Right. I said, we've done our homework, Philip. We got all the witnesses. We got all the evidence. I've been hypnotized twice. They got the transcripts of being hypnotized, and that pulls a lot of the details out. And that's a story right there.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask you about next. I know that you've undergone hypnosis a couple times, and that you've had other encounters with this type of thing other than this major incident.
Back in 1993, I was going on a fishing trip, and I think it was May of '93. And I told my wife, I said, look, I'm going to go fishing. Now, back then, I didn't fish at night. Sure. After all this, I would get in my boat and come on home. So I'm going to run out to the island.
That original incident had kind of driven you away from going out at night.
Oh, yeah. I really didn't want to be out there. So I got my boat loaded up. I told her, I said, I'm going to the island to do some fishing, and I'll be back before dark. Okay. So I left and went out. It's about a 25, 30-minute ride in my boat. Got out and I anchored up. This is where the bologna sandwich come in. I anchored my little boat up waiting on a tide change. I said, well, I'll eat my lunch while I'm waiting for the tide to change. Well, that happened to be a bologna sandwich. And while I was eating, I noticed there was a big cloud in the sky coming over. But it was just a cloud, I thought. But under the cloud, you could see the bottom of something. Well, to make a long story short, this thing pulled me back up. It was the same female creature, or looked like the same one. Now, whether it's the same one or not, I don't know.
Right.
That had done it. And she had me against the wall trying to put her fingers down my throat. And I figured that was to get something out of my nasal cavities and all. And me and her actually got into a physical conversation. I beat her head against the wall. And I was planning on wrapping my arm around her neck because, you know, I was a big boy by then. I was fixing to leave. This is 20 years after. I said, well, I'll go down, but I don't mind dying, but I'm going to die with evidence in my hand this time.
Amen.
There ain't nobody going to doubt. So I had her around the neck trying to get out the door, and the same big ugly creature that happened in the first abduction popped up and come alive and did the same thing, grabbed me by the arm and injected me with something. And but by this time, me and this female creature had already had it out, and I had her beat down pretty good. And I was fixing, if I could have found a way to open the door and get out of there, I was fixing to take her and dive out. So, but anyhow, this all came out later. Bud Hopkins, I got home and I told, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning before I got back home, and I was supposed to be home probably 3 o'clock in the evening or before dark. And I got home. I didn't say nothing to my wife. But I know she thought that I'd been in a bar fight or something, the way that I looked, because I was bloody. Now, then I took a butt beating then. I mean, I had claw marks on my eyes. I was scratched up. I was bloody. And I went on and pulled my clothes off, took a shower, and washed the blood off. So,
what were you thinking at this moment, Calvin? I mean, I know it had to be, you know, unfathomable to you, but at that time, did you think, well, these things have come back for me again, or what was running through your mind at that time?
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, because it was the same identical ones that had did this before.
Right.
So anyhow, I got up the next morning and I went out to my boat. Well, there was a friend of mine that come by, and he was actually a news reporter, and that's how I met him. He worked for WXXB 25, and he came out, but I wouldn't ever give him an interview.
Right.
And he said, what in the world has happened to you? So, well, I went fishing and had some problems. I said the biggest problem I had was missing time.
Sure.
He said, I know a guy, because he started studying these abduction cases and all after that. He said, I know a guy that's got a book right now on missing time. You need to go meet him. Let's go to Florida. He's giving a...
And was that Bud Hopkins?
Bud Hopkins.
Yeah.
By the way, did you catch any fish? I said, I ain't caught a fish. And he reached and opened the cooler, and the cooler was full of fish. And I thought, how in the world did all them get in there? But anyhow, make a long story short, we left and went to see Bud Hopkins, who he was talking about. So we went to the conference there in Florida. I said, look, I'm not going in no UFO conference. I don't want to be around these people, and these people probably don't know me. I said, but if I can talk to Bud Hopkins, which I didn't know Bud Hopkins from anybody then, I would love to talk to him if he can explain some of this missing time.
Right.
Well, he went in and found Bud, and Bud said, look, I got a room down here. Y'all go to my room. Here's the key, and I'll be there in just a few minutes. And he was good to his word. He showed up. We started talking. And matter of fact, it was Bud Hopkins and somebody else had come. But anyhow, we was in the room, and he knocked on the door, come in. Well, he knew my name. He shook my hand, introduced himself. he said, look, would you consider letting me hypnotize you? I said, no, I don't think I can be hypnotized.
Right.
He said, I really want to do this, and I think it'll help you. Well, that thinking it would help would be good. But what I didn't know, he was going to put a post-hypnotic suggestion in my head that I wouldn't remember this until it was time to remember.
Ah.
So I agreed. I said, okay. I said, but here's the other part of the deal. I have 3 friends, 2 that live here in Tampa, and 1 that came with me. And I got a ball bat in my car. If you make me do something stupid,
right.
or you make put thoughts in my head that shouldn't be there, I'm going to let them take that ball bat and they're going to beat you to death with it. And then they're going to hand it to me and leave. Now,
right.
this actually happened. It was a show within itself.
True.
He said, I'm not that way. I said, well, I've seen these floor shows in Las Vegas, and I've seen them get up and cluck like chickens and everything else. So anyhow, I agreed to let him hypnotize me. Well, actually, I didn't ever think I was hypnotized to bring out the fine details until I got to doing the book. And I mentioned to Philip Mantle, I said, you know, Bud Hopkins, whoever he is, he used to be a friend of mine. And I know him well. He's come to my house and stayed. I said, well, he tried to hypnotize me. He said, well, he's dead now. But Dr. Jacobs has taken over his work. Let me see what I can do. So he got the actual cassette tape, and it's not very clear, but this is one place where the language barrier come in. He got the cassette tape and was doing the transcripts into the book from the cassette tape. And Philip would have to call me, well, what does this mean? He said, what is a tag? What is a bologna sandwich? Right, and that's where all this come in place. You know, like the trunk of a car, they call it the boot over there.
Right, yeah.
I said, Philip, y'all speak different languages than I do. Do I have to translate this to you? Yeah, I got to know. So he transcribed it into the book. Then he sent me a copy of it. But I still didn't remember it being, I didn't think I was hypnotized. But when I got a copy of he had the tape converted to a CD, I listened to a little piece of it and I just shut it down. And I went out, my wife was on the porch. I said, you know, that idiot did hypnotize me in Florida, and I didn't realize it. I said, what I want you to do, if you would, go back and listen to this, and you remember it. Don't tell me nothing about it, because I want to tell you as I remember things.
Sure.
And you listen to this tape, or you read it, and just remember it. And when I think of something, I tell you, and we check it out and see how true everything is. She came back, was back here about 45 minutes, and was in here crying. And,
oh, wow.
Come back out crying. She said, I can't listen to no more of this. I can't listen to all this. I never had no idea. And actually, that was unfair of me because I still hadn't talked to her about this until this, we was putting this into the book.
Right,
so I had to sit down then and talk to her about it. And it was upsetting to her.
Oh, sure. So you said that you got married that November. Was that the November right after that October when this experience happened?
Right. It was October 11th when this happened. I got married November the 9th.
Wow. Right. You had a lot of wild life changes right there together.
Oh, all of it was right there. And back then, she was a good deal younger than I was. And I didn't feel like she would understand or could understand what was going on. She wasn't 16. I was 18. She was 16.
Right.
And I knew her daddy was a hard ass, and he would if I had told him.
You didn't want to risk anything before the marriage happened.
Absolutely not.
Right.
But it worked out. We got married in a little church, and we took a little honeymoon. Her grandparents had a place out in the country. We went out there and stayed in their house. They had done moved, but they had this place. And spent some time together. Then I got up, went on back to work in the oil field. 2 days after the honeymoon, she went with me to Baby Net, Alabama, where we was drilling a well and working.
Wow. So the anniversary of your abduction encounter is also pretty close to the anniversary of your wedding.
Almost right there on top of each other.
A month's difference, right.
So, I celebrate the anniversary of getting married because I kind of feel obligated to do that. And I'm obligated also to the anniversary of this happened because I'm obligated to the city here because they've been so good to me, and they put on book signings on this anniversary every year.
That's what I was going to say. I know that you and I know this well. There's not a lot of money in writing books, but I know that you've said before the money that you have gotten has went back to the city and the charities, and I think that's awesome. There's not a lot of people who would do that.
It has. I mean, and I devote a lot of time back to them. Now in January, the public library down here, I'm devoting a couple of days to go down to the kids have a science fair, and we always set up little space rides and things, for them.
Yeah.
And I do a little book signing for the city, They order the books and buy them, and I sign them, and they make pretty good on them. They charge more for a face-to-face because I didn't want to get into all that.
Right. No, I understand that completely. Understand that. Well, Calvin, let me ask you this, and I know we've been going for a minute, so after this we'll wrap it up. But I know in your Jimmy Church interview, and I may have misunderstood you there, I know that you mentioned that your father worked at Groom Lake at one point. Is that accurate?
That's very accurate. He worked for he was a subcontractor for the Atomic Energy Commission, and what they would do, they would go out and drill these wells to put these nuclear bombs in and explode them.
Sure.
So that's what he did.
And I know, and I don't really know exactly. I just know when I heard that immediately popped in my mind, of course, because I know you're probably familiar with the mythology around Groom Lake and Area 51 and all of that around there. Do you think there's any connection between your father's work at Area 51 and Groom Lake and what's happened to you over the years?
I don't believe it is. I think it's just a coincidence that he went out there and worked.
Sure. And
to be honest with you, I really don't feel like they have alien bodies stored there. Nothing.
Right.
If they did have some, they would be stored somewhere else beside one of our top secret. That Groom Lake, what people don't realize, all it is, the CIA was doing what they call the skunk work there and building these experimental aircrafts and flying them. And that explains some of the different lights and all they seen come in at night, because your spy planes, your U-2s, and your new jets and all that was built right there. And I'm sure, they might have got some technology from somewhere. But I really don't think myself, and it could be that all these bodies were stored out there.
Right. Well, we've always said, if they were at any point, they've definitely moved them now with as popular as Area 51 has gotten in these past few decades.
Oh, yeah, they're not going to leave them there. Groom Lake's supposed to be hidden. You can't even fly over it. But that's because of all these experimental aircrafts.
Sure,
and,
sure.
And I know what it is. I know the FBI background checks and all the whole family went through when he was working out there. So I know what it would be to get in out there and all, and you don't want to do that because you get your butt shot.
Oh yeah. Be buried in an unmarked grave somewhere and probably never heard from again.
Oh yeah. And I've not heard a few people trying to go in, but they got motion detectors. They got snipers setting up. Somebody told me that they was trying to get in there one time, and they made it past a motion detector, and they started noticing little red lights all over them.
Jeez.
So, yeah, nobody wants to take that chance.
No, that would be too much for anybody, I feel like.
Yeah. And anybody that's ever worked there and come out and tried to talk about it, I don't think they would still be around. If they think the Man in Black's bad, get them men that's over that base and you talk and work and you been worked there and tried to talk about some of the stuff that went on. Not only did my father have to sign disclosures, but we even had to sign them. I mean, and I wouldn't even talk about this if he wasn't in such bad health right now. And,
sure.
But anyhow, that's the deal with that.
Very interesting. I just heard that pop up in that interview, and I said, I've got to ask Calvin about that because that's a very interesting coincidence, nonetheless.
It is, and it could be a connection.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this, Calvin, and we'll wrap it up. I know this is a big question, and I know that I know you've probably been asked this many times. But what exactly at this point do you think happened to you and Charlie in October of 1973? What's your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I can absolutely say that I don't know for sure that's still some of the facts that I'm looking for. But to be honest with you, the only reasoning that I could put on it is life from another planet coming down to check us out and experiment with us and all. I feel like we're guinea pigs, So I really don't know. I'm still hunting answers on all that.
Sure, as so many of us are. I know that everybody listening tonight is probably looking for their own answers, and we're all looking for those answers in some way or another, it seems like.
Yes, sir. Yeah, everybody hunt the truth.
Very much.
Yeah. Hey, Calvin, so it was good talking to you. So I was wondering about your two books. Where are the best places for people to get those?
Amazon. It's Pascagoula, Amazon. Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter, My Story, Calvin Parker's the first book. And the next book's Pascagoula, The Story Continues, New Evidence, New Witnesses is the second one. But both of them be bought right there at Amazon.
Awesome. We have each read one of those books. I took the latter. Stephen took the first. And, there's some great reading for anybody that's interested in this phenomenon at large or in your all's case specifically. So definitely recommend that to everybody. They're great books, Calvin. And we appreciate you talking with us. We appreciate the books. We just appreciate you having this conversation with us tonight.
Well, I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for having me.
Definitely. We'd love to do it again sometime if you're still around, if you haven't went off the grid yet.
Well, just shoot me an email and we'll do it if something comes up.
Sure will, Calvin. Thank you so much. And we'll send you the episode as soon as it's finished so you can hear it.
Good deal. Thank you a lot. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. Have a good night.
You too, buddy. Bye-bye.
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 So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Midnight in Kentucky. Man, what an interview. There was so much good stuff in that. I enjoyed speaking to Calvin so much.
Oh, it was a delight speaking to Calvin. That was just, I think, the highlight of any show we've done so far. That was just a great interview, and it's an honor to speak to him.
Very much so. Very much so. He talked about so much in there. He talked about his initial encounter. What happened to him back in October of '73. He talked about, what happened to him in 1993, what seems to have happened to him several times throughout his life.
Right. And he gave such vivid descriptions of these beings that he encountered during this abduction.
Very much so.
And he as through his experience through his life, as he's went through this, he's met a lot of people who has hypnotized him. Sure. And met a lot of interesting people at UFO conferences. Even just talking about he was a friend with Betty Hill.
Yeah. And I heard and we talked about this a little bit before the show, but I heard in Jimmy Church's interview with Calvin that when he met Travis Walton, him and Travis just sat in the back and talked for a long time. And then later that evening, Travis Walton got his guitar, and a couple other people from the UFO community went up on stage and played some Kenny Rogers songs. And I was like, geez, that would be the highlight. That would be the highlight. As a musician and a music fan, I think a concert of Kenny Rogers songs with Travis Walton and Calvin Parker would be the ultimate concert experience.
That would be the cherry on top of the sundae.
For real. It really would. It really would. But yes, it was awesome to speak with Calvin. Such an awesome, humble dude who wants to share a story. Yeah. You know what I mean? You can tell, but you can also tell, he's been sitting on this thing for 46 years. I mean, he's not wanted to tell. Like he said, he didn't want to get his family involved, and I can understand that. He didn't want, all this media attention. But I'm glad that we got him before he goes off the grid.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think he's done a lot of good things for his community.
Very much so.
We'll put a story in the show links from the Washington Post where they put the historical marker down there.
Right. And all the charity work he talked about doing for the community.
Yeah, and he's just an all-around great guy.
A good dude. And, his story is one of those stories that are probably go down in UFO history and unexplained history, along with, the Patterson-Gimlin film of the Sasquatch, and along with, the Betty and Barney Hill abduction and Roswell and all of those things. So it's an honor to have spoken to Calvin, being someone that so many awesome researchers have spoken to, and so many heroes of both of us have talked to.
Exactly. Yeah, he's got, this is kind of part of his new book tour that he's running on, and the new book is called Pascagoula, The Story Continues, New Evidence, New Witnesses.
Right, which is what we were talking about at the very top of that interview, where he's talking about all those additional witnesses that saw the same craft that took him and Charles.
Right, yeah, and this is people who was in the area that night and have seen the same thing, and they have come forward and said, yeah, I know, I've seen this. And the thing that he was talking about where the Coast Guard was poking the thing underwater.
Dude. And that is intense.
That was very intense.
But we've got a lot of reports. I mean, we have report after report of these underwater UFOs. Mm-hmm. I mean, hell, even the Tic Tac incident, the massive, Navy sighting that has blown up these past few years. We've got a report of possibly something else being under the water in that report.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's something I wanted to ask him. If we ever get another interview, that'll definitely be my first question. That's the one that I missed. Yep. But we'll definitely ask him that if we talk when we talk to him again.
Yeah.
But yes, I want to thank Calvin so much.
Yeah, I just appreciate him taking the time to talk to us. I mean, he was open and talked to us for about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
It was a great interview.
It was awesome. So for everybody out there, follow us on Facebook, Twitter. Where else we got? Facebook, Twitter,
Midnight Kentucky,
MidnightKentucky.com. You can hear us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts,
iHeartRadio,
wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a review. Leave us a rating. That helps us out so much. Helps get the show to new people. And again, we want to thank all of our new followers that we gained this week. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's what we do it for. We do it to get these stories out to people so we can find out what weird things are happening in the world around us. us. So, till the next moon rises, night owls, for Midnight in Kentucky, I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
Good night.
Excellent. You've been listening to Midnight in Kentucky,
a Ransom Letter Publishing podcast.
Join us on Twitter and Facebook.
Or get in contact with your questions, comments, or stories of high strangeness
at midnightinkentuckypodcast@gmail.com.